Hi, this is Pastor Joe Green, head pastor of Antioch Assembly Church located in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, also the founder of the 2019 movement, and I want to share a couple of thoughts with you. I want to talk a little bit today about political correctness, but I want to talk about some specific occurrences. So most of you are probably familiar with the whole tiff with Rosanne Barr and her top one of very highly rated what do they call it, a remix or revamping of her show, the Roseanne Show, was taken off the air. Hulu and some of the other platforms have pulled not only the new show but also the reruns that they have been running. Roseanne, her new show was very popular. Her first show was very popular, very highly rated. Her new show was very popular, and so it was taken off the air immediately within a couple of hours of a tweet storm that Roseanne took part in. So I'm going to read a little bit of it and then we're going to talk about it. It reads, recently, there was an article, it says, recently Rosanne Barr was fired by ABC, her agent, and several other places because of her remarks regarding Valerie Jarrett. The article is entitled, Rosanne Barr incites fury with racist tweet and her show is canceled by ABC. In announcing the show's cancellation, ABC's entertainment president, Channing Dungey, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, said in a statement that Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values. I'm going to read that again. Channing Dungey said in a statement that Roseanne's Twitter statement is abhorrent, repugnant, and inconsistent with our values. Now, if you get a chance and you look at the tweet she tweeted, it was assumed to be about Valerie Jarrett.
Racism is not funny, and Rosanne Barr is a racist. Now her show is canceled. It's 3 o'clock on the East Coast, noon on the West Coast. I'm Shepard Smith in New York, and this is Shepard Smith reporting. ABC made the decision to nix the hit reboot of Roseanne just hours after the star comedian went on a rant on Twitter, made a racist statement, and not for the first time, about the former Obama White House advisor, Valerie Jarrett. Roseanne responding to an unfounded claim that President Obama had spied on French presidential candidates. She accused his former advisor of helping. The tweet, which Roseanne has since deleted, read, Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby, equals VJ. VJ for Valerie Jarrett. As expected, that took on a life of its own. Not only did Roseanne delete the tweet, she tried to say she was sorry. Quoting here, I apologize to Valerie Jarrett and to all Americans. I am truly sorry for making a bad joke about her politics and her looks. I should have known better. Forgive me. My joke was in bad taste. She also said she was leaving Twitter. Fast forward just a few hours, and ABC says the show, which was signed for a second season, is now canceled. It's not as if ABC did not know it had a show whose star is racist. Roseanne tweeted about President Obama's national security advisor and UN ambassador back in 2013. She wrote, Susan Rice is a man with big swinging ape balls. Despite her history, ABC was sticking with its star, at least until today. The show took off since coming back to television, the ratings through the roof, conservatives pointing to its success as an example of a greater political movement in this country, away from the left, away from what they called political correctness.
Mao Zedong. Some of you may be familiar with Mao Zedong, commonly known as Chairman Mao. He was a Chinese communist revolutionary who became the founding father of the People's Republic of China, which he ruled as the chairman of the Communist Party in China from its establishment in 1949 until his death in 1976. Communist China was basically, they called him Chairman Mao, right? He was the founder. He was the ideological person, person who helped form this government. Now here's the dangers of that. And most of us will recognize that China is not a great place to live, right? Their human rights record is deplorable. I'm going to take it a step further. Conversely, This is Mao's, Chairman Mao. His regime has been called autocratic and totalitarian and condemned for bringing about mass repression and destroying religious and cultural artifacts and sites. It was additionally responsible for the vast numbers of deaths, with estimates ranging from 30 to 70 million. So that's what happens to these communist totalitarian regimes, because ultimately the people get tired of being under the control of the select few, and they begin to revolt. And the only way for the communists to stay in power is through violence and through bondage and incarceration, right? So it is reported that 30 to 70 million people died under the communist regime of Chairman Mao. The term democide. So democide is a term defined by political scientist R.J. Rummel as the murder of any persons or people by their government, including genocide, policide, and mass murder. So democide is a term used for these governmental regimes like Chairman Mao's communist regime that killed 30 to 70 million people. So in the 20th century, over 150 million people were killed by these totalitarian regimes. So if you look at Mao, if you look at Stalin, and these other totalitarian governmental systems. So I wanted to define that because sometimes we have painted socialism and communism as positive things, because what we do is we have a certain mindset of entitlement that says, hey, more people died in the 20th century based on being killed by totalitarian regimes. Somebody not long ago, and they were saying about these tax breaks that rich people get. So I can, if I was a multimillionaire and I passed on wealth to my son or my daughter, and that person my son or my daughter doesn't pay taxes. First of all, chances are I paid taxes when I made the wealth, right? But not only that, but it's not fair. A biblical concept is leaving an inheritance for your children. So it's not fair for the government to penalize my child for my hard work and my efforts. Bernie Sanders ran on a socialistic platform, and because people were so uneducated about the ideology behind socialism and the long-term effects of socialism, people were like, that's great. Bernie was saying things like everybody should have free health care and everybody should have a free college education. He says just like wealthy people's children, they get to go to college for free. They don't have student loan debt. And that's not a true statement. What happens is most wealthy people, they don't get any type of financial aid. Their parents pay for them to go to college because their parents, using whatever means of capitalism or wealth accumulation, was able to pay for their child to go to college, right? So somebody's paying for it. It's just that that child is not paying for it. So whenever you talk about free everything, free healthcare, free college, somebody has to pay for it. And with the socialistic mindset, the entitlement mindset says, if you have more than you need, I should be able to get what you have. So if you went out and bought and worked for 5 houses and I don't have a house, then you should give me one of your houses. Now, if you decided to give me one of your houses, that's your right. But ultimately what socialism and communism does is the state comes in and it takes your houses from you and gives it to somebody else. That's why it's wicked. And it might be good if you're the homeless person, but if you're the person who has went out and accumulated wealth, or if your parents or grandparents went out and worked hard and accumulated wealth, you should be able to pass that on.
Once there was a South American country with a promising future. It had a functioning democracy, a rapidly developing economy, and a growing middle class. All the important indicators, including education, healthcare, and foreign investment, were pointed in the right direction. It was far from perfect, but the mood was hopeful, and with good reason. But now all that promise is gone. The country is a failed state, a hollowed-out shell of its former self. Services like power and water are sporadic. The most basic consumer goods, from bread to toilet paper, are in chronically short supply. Crime has skyrocketed. Freedom of the press is almost non-existent. Democracy has been replaced by a virtual dictatorship. The country is, I'm sorry to say, my beloved Venezuela, a place in which my family has deep roots. I can tell you what happened to it in one word: socialism. In 1999, then candidate for president Hugo Chavez promised to lead the people of Venezuela to a socialist paradise. His theme was Esperanza y Cambio, hope and change. Venezuela is a nation of great wealth, Chavez said, but it's being stolen from its citizens by the evil capitalists and evil corporations. This wrong would be righted, he assured the voters, if they elected him. And they did, to their everlasting regret. Chavez drew inspiration from his mentor, Fidel Castro. Like his mentor, he enjoyed giving speeches that sometimes lasted as many as 7 hours. He even gave himself his own weekly television show, where he would spontaneously break into song. Here's a rule. When your nation's leader starts singing on national television, you're in trouble. Under Chavez, the government of Venezuela took over industry after industry. The government, he assured everyone, would run these businesses better than private enterprise, and the profits would be shared by the people. With great fanfare, he tore up contracts with multinational oil and gas companies and demanded that they pay much higher royalties. When they refused, he told them to leave. They did. His image was burnished by Hollywood celebrities who flocked to see the great work he was doing, taking money from the rich and giving it to the poor. Progressive politicians from the U.S. and Europe also praised him, lavishly. Here's another rule. When Hollywood celebrities visit your country to praise your leader, you're in trouble. When the leader sings on national television and is praised by Hollywood celebrities, you're doomed. Socialism always works in the beginning, so people are fooled in the beginning. It's easy for governments to confiscate money, but eventually, there's no more money to confiscate. In the case of Venezuela, I mean that literally. People who could get money out of the country did. Many left the country altogether. Nearly 2 million, according to Venezuelan sociologist Tomás Baez. The wealth creators continued to create wealth, but they created it somewhere else, Miami or Madrid, and other places around the world. When Chavez first ran for president in 1999, he said he would leave in 2 years if people weren't happy with him. But, like Castro, Chavez never had any intention of giving up power. He died in office in 2013, replaced by his vice president, Nicolás Maduro. Maduro is Chavez without the charisma or the voice. The country is now a pariah, shunned by the world and isolated. It's so bad that many international airlines refuse to fly there. People stand in lines for hours just to get food. Sometimes they walk away empty-handed. A recent survey found that 75% of Venezuelan adults lost weight in 2016, an average of 19 pounds. This national weight loss program is known cynically as the Maduro diet. Still, Maduro holds on to power. Opposition leaders and journalists who report the truth are jailed. Venezuela is a cautionary tale. Once a country goes down a socialist path, there's no easy way back. And the longer a country stays socialist, the harder it is to reform it. Venezuela has been socialist for 2 decades. If you don't think it can happen here, whether here is the United States or Europe or anywhere else, you're fooling yourself. When people get used to depending on the government, no matter how poor they remain, that dependency is hard to break. That's why you should never buy the socialist lie. Socialism is a drug, and like a drug, it feels great at first, but eventually it will ruin your country, just like it ruined Venezuela. I'm Debbie D'Souza for Prager University.
Right, that's one of the dangers of that. Leon Trotsky. Leon Trotsky, he was a Russian revolutionary theorist and social politician, ideologically a Marxist and a Leninist, which is, Vladimir Lenin and Karl Marx were the architects of the communist, the Communist Party and the communist ideology. So Leon Trotsky was a Russian revolutionary, and so that ideology of communism comes from these guys. Now let's talk about political correctness. I wanted to lay those terms so as we move forward, we do it from a common place of understanding. So the words politically and correct had, of course, been used together before the last century. The term previously used correctness in its literal sense and without any particular reference to language that it might be considered offensive and discriminatory. So in a book by Ruth Perry called A Short History of the Term Politically Correct, which was made in 1992, you can go read that book if you like, A Short History of the Term Politically Correct, traces the now accepted use of the term back to the 1960s in Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. So we just talked about Chairman Mao Zedong and how he formed the Chinese Republic, Communist Republic, and it was instrumental in the death of 30 to 70 million people, and China still has their issues because of their governmental system. He was one of the first people in the 1960s to use the term politically correct as a weapon against political opponents of his or people that were ideologically opposed to him. Leon Trotsky also favorably used it, you know, as they pushed for the Bolshevik Revolution. So politically correct was, you know, the new left radicals in the 60s. They fancied themselves revolutionaries in the mode of Che Rivera, Fidel Castro, and Mao. So politically correct was first used negatively in the 80s in America, and it was a way to silence opposition. Despite the liberals' turnabout, conservatives continue to refer to themselves as PC. So not PC, I'm sorry. So the conservatives, the non-liberals, they began to refer to themselves as non-PC or non-politically correct because they were promoting the free speech and the free exchange of ideas. And so that's when PC became a very negative term, which it should be, because of the of what happens, what the results of political correctness is. Political correctness means whenever and wherever, in whatever form it appears, the state or similar authority, the church, society, or dominant ideology has decided what you can or cannot think or say. It has been decided for you. Its definition is one that you must accept. Your opinion is wrong. Your opinion should not be heard. Your opinion is incorrect. So the foundation of politically correct is that if you have an ideology, a philosophy, or a doctrine that varies from what they call the popular ideology of that time, then what you're saying is called not politically correct, right? So again, I'm going back to my initial statement with Roseanne, because the classifications of people that she insulted are considered off limits. She's been shut down, even though for years, Roseanne's been around for years. You know, the Roseanne show, I think it was in 1989, they said she was on more magazine covers than any other person, right? She was one of the most popular television people. She had her own television show. Personalities is the word I was looking for. Stand-up comedians of her time, because of her crude humor. If you guys recall, she sung the national anthem, and when she got done, she sung it very badly because she's not a good singer. She spit on the ground and she grabbed her crotch, right? That is the type of comedy that she was known for. But now it's turned on her because she stepped into the high grass of, if you will, of political correctness. And because of that, she's been severely punished. Identity politics, which is cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism, and as I established that Karl Marx is one of the architects of the communist regimes in Europe. And Karl Marxism, also known as identity politics, is something that's very dangerous. If you notice, when I talked about these off-limits groups of people, I talked about people of color. So that term people of color is actually racist in its own, because you're categorizing people based on their skin color. We should never, and see, whether it's talking about the Bible, whether we're talking about politics, things shouldn't be based on your skin color or any type of identity that you have. It should be based on your ideology or your merits, right? That's what this country is about. So you should disagree with me not based on my skin color or my classification that I came from, my ethnicity. You should disagree with me based on ideas, philosophies, doctrines, and those type of things. When we get to a place that it's all about identity politics, and see, the left has been very good at promoting this cultural Marxism, which is why 90% of black people identify themselves as Democrats, even though the basis of the Democratic platform has been in contrast to the historical philosophies and belief systems of black America, because black people were not black people were very God-fearing people. So they did studies, and out of the ethnic groups in America, people that are considered African Americans had the highest rate of people that identified themselves as God-fearing. They had the lowest percentage of people that identified themselves as atheists, which are people that don't believe in God. So they were God-fearing people. You know, black people were, and people have defined the black community because of the political correct tone. They've identified black people as being homophobic because black people didn't accept homosexuality as a whole in our societies, in our community. And so those type of things, right? I grew up in the you know, the day that I grew up in, and my grandparents really pushed education and working hard for whatever you get. So it goes against our basic cultural identity, the Democratic platform, but yet because of identity politics, we've all attached ourselves to Democrats, and we believe if you're black, you're supposed to be a Democrat. And inversely, if you're black, you shouldn't be a Republican or a conservative. They call you a coon or Uncle Tom. That's because of cultural Marxism. Cultural Marxism is the division of people into oppressors and oppressed. So what cultural Marxists do, and it's one of the strategies in order for them to have gotten their political philosophies in place, is they always set people up to oppose each other. If you read Saul Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, he was a cultural Marxist. President Obama and Hillary Clinton were cultural Marxists because they were students of Saul Alinsky. So what they always do is they always pit people against each other, right? You always have to put somebody into oppressor and oppressed class. So even in the pro-life movement, and if you're pro-life and you're anti-abortion, they say that you're trying to violate a woman's right to choose. If you are, you know, anti-gay marriage, or if you oppose legalizing gay marriage, they'll give you a instance where a gay person was brutalized or mistreated because they were gay. And so they always have to set up those scenarios, and it's based on emotions. It's not based on statistics, which is why when we talk about political correctness and I talk about emotionalism, political correctness has to tap into emotionalism, because 99% of the arguments that are politically correct don't stand the test of actual empirical data or facts or statistics, right? So that's why it's important for us to understand we can't get caught up in the political correctness, the cultural Marxism, or the emotionalism that comes with it, because we can be deceived by it. So even when they passed Obamacare, which is a form of socialized medicine, they would get individual examples of people that were sick and they couldn't afford a doctor, but they ignored the overall impact that the way it was set up would be against our economy, right? Whenever we talk about you know, a police officer shooting a black person, and they show it over and over and over again, but ultimately you got to realize that statistically that is an anomaly for a white cop to kill a black man. If you look at statistics, that is not a wide-ranging occurrence, but they have to show it, and they keep showing it so that we all have the impression that this is a epidemic or plague in society. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm saying it's not to the place where they try to paint that picture, because they need to get you to identify with a class of people and against another class of people. That's what cultural Marxism does. This is what David Horowitz said, which is a person I really admire now. I've been listening to some of his things. He used to work with the Black Panthers in the 60s, brilliant person. And he talks about cultural Marxism in a historical context. And he says that cultural Marxism is a division within historical context by race, sexual orientation, gender, then prioritizing these oppressed people's feelings and socioeconomic standing. So now we have to promote these people, and they have to become off limits. That's how cultural Marxism makes way. That's how they use political correctness. Because now, if you say that this person has been oppressed, now their feelings have to override everything out there. It means that they're off limits. You can't say anything about them, even if they're bad people. So, you know, the liberals, when you said MS-13, because MS-13 is a Mexican gang, they're ignoring the actions of MS-13 because they were called animals, not because they were Mexicans, but because of the fact that they were a violent gang. They talked about, when you understand, like, for instance, illegal immigrants. And what President Trump said in his campaign was that a lot of the people that come across the border illegally are not good people. But because they attach them with being Mexican and they attach that with being somebody of color, then you can't say anything about them because that's considered off limits, right? So that is one of the tools of political correctness that really will show us, I mean, it'll set you up for failure, because it's a way of manipulation and control that just allows a power shift from people by using this particular strategy. Horowitz said cultural Marxism is found in the educational system, and he lamented over why many U.S. major universities now lack conservative professors. So most major universities now most of the professors are liberal. It's very few conservative viewpoints that's being expressed in colleges and universities. A philosophy that stigmatizes the people based on their race, skin color, and their ethnic identity, their origin, cannot coexist in a free country, David Horowitz says. Another thing that happens in regards to this whole thing, and I'm gonna start wrapping this up, but the Me Too movement. So I talked about what happened with Roseanne. I also want to talk about what happened with Morgan Freeman. And I was watching the news this morning, and they were talking about how Morgan Freeman's lawyer is sending a letter to CNN demanding an apology.
Morgan Freeman fighting back against that CNN report, demanding a retraction from the network over their story accusing the Oscar winner of sexual misconduct. ABC's Lindsay Davis is here with more on all that. Good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Robin. Morgan Freeman's legal team has sent CNN a 10-page letter essentially saying, take it back and say you're sorry. This after CNN's report last week where several women said they had been sexually harassed by the now 80-year-old actor. The law firm representing Morgan is calling it journalistic malpractice.
This morning, Morgan Freeman is hitting back, demanding CNN apologize and retract an article in which 8 women accuse the veteran actor of sexual misconduct. CNN entertainment reporter Chloe Melas is one of the alleged victims and co-author of the article.
This investigation started after Morgan Freeman made comments to me during a junket last year for the movie Going in Style.
Melas, who was 6 months pregnant at the time of the alleged incident, says she believes Freeman made an alleged sexual remark to her during this press junket, playing this clip.
Lord, do I wish I was there.
Melas asked her audience to note where Freeman's eyes were when he made the comment. But Freeman's attorney says Melas misinterpreted Freeman's statement and that the star was simply responding to a story told by Freeman's co-star, Michael Caine.
One time I congratulated the woman on being pregnant and she wasn't. And so I've never done it again. For 50 years I've never done it.
You've learned your lesson.
I learned my lesson.
Lord, do I wish I was there.
Another alleged incident in the CNN report involved producer Tyra Martin, who interviewed Freeman several times. Melas claimed that this incident crossed a line.
It's unclear if that incident was ever caught on tape, but we do, Carol, have an example of some of his behavior with her from another interview.
Are you enjoying Bachelor?
I'm enjoying Bachelor life immensely, because I get to look at you and drool.
But Martin says CNN mischaracterized her experience.
I'm sorry for anyone that's had an unfortunate experience or feels harassed or assaulted. That wasn't my experience with Morgan Freeman. The interviews were always fun for me.
So one of the things that the feminist movement did, because feminism is now a class of people, so because they're tapping into this cultural Marxism, this political correct, whole ideology, that with the Me Too movement, what they're doing is they're trying to emasculate men, and they're trying to, because political correctness, that's what it does. It emasculates any opposing viewpoint. So what happens with the Me Too movement? Again, I want want to give a disclaimer that men should never be rude or crude to women. I mean, sexually, they shouldn't be aggressive towards a woman. They shouldn't touch them inappropriately. They shouldn't do anything to them or say anything to them without their consent. That doesn't mean a man shouldn't make a pass at a woman. It means that if a man makes a pass at a woman and the woman tells him that she's not interested, then she's off limits. That's what that's about. Now, a man shouldn't go up and touch a woman without her consent anyway. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about making a pass at her, flirting with her, saying something to her that shows his interest towards her. That's how relationships get started. And so what happens is that this Me Too movement now gets it to a place where it can manipulate things and situations. What do I mean by that? So now if a man makes a pass at a woman, then she wants to attach herself to the Me Too movement, and all of a sudden that's sexual harassment, or he's doing something inappropriate. We can't conflate those issues, right? So rape, sexual abuse, and harassment needs to be clearly defined. First of all, if a man rapes a woman, he should go to jail, period. If a man inappropriately touches a woman without her consent, especially after he's been warned, and the reason I say especially after he's been warned, a lot of these environments, you know, you go to a nightclub sometimes, there's women who are dancing seductively with people. I know from years and years ago when I was out in the club, we'd be dancing, and sometimes women will be very close to you while they're dancing. So a man may reach out and touch her, and if she says, look, that was inappropriate, then that's off limits. If a man creates an environment where he is harassing a woman, which means even after he knows that she is not interested or it's not appropriate, she doesn't feel like he has the right to say the things he's saying to her, that is harassment. He should be punished for that. But the reason I'm saying these things is because it's being weaponized. Political correctness is being weaponized. The Me Too movement is a weaponized philosophy that is becoming very, very prevalent, and it can be dangerous if used improperly. Because these things, just like the conservative versus liberal, the liberals have weaponized many of these things as a way to silence the other side and to emasculate or take away the power of the other group of people. So, Morgan Freeman, one of the reporters tried to say that Morgan Freeman made her feel, during an interview, made her feel uncomfortable that he was sexually harassing her. Now, they said it was 8 different women. I'm talking about 2 specific cases to prove my point. So when they were promoting a movie he did with him and Michael Caine, and he's on stage, she said that he made her feel uncomfortable by making inappropriate remarks. But then when they showed the video, and what Mr. Freeman said was she took it out of context, which she did. Now, Michael Caine is on stage, and he's a friend, of course, and a colleague of Morgan Freeman. He shares a story when he saw a woman and he asked her if she was pregnant, and the woman said she wasn't pregnant. He said that after that he learned that he would never say that or make that statement again. Morgan Freeman's response says, "I wish I was there." That was soon after Michael Caine said what he did. Now when he's saying that, he's looking in the audience at a lady who's a reporter who was pregnant at the time. She tells her story was that he was making an inappropriate comment towards her while he was looking at her. But when you took it in its proper context, when he says, "I wish I was there," he's not referring to her, he's referring to the comments that Michael Caine just made. See, that's a dangerous precedence, because if women can do that to ruin people's careers, especially if they didn't like a person, or say, for instance, that wants to be used to blackmail somebody. So we have to be very careful and not allow these things to take root. The other thing was, he was being interviewed by an African-American lady, and he was being kind of flirtatious during the interview. So another person, I believe it was the same reporter, she said she witnessed it, and he was being inappropriate with the lady and made her feel uncomfortable. They interviewed the lady, and the lady says, "No, I didn't feel uncomfortable during the interview. I just took it as him being, you know, being coy or whatever." So again, we have to be very careful. We have to be able to recognize these strategies, the long-term dangers that come with using these things inappropriately, because it can be used to squelch free speech. It can be used to put power in one group over another, and it can be used to control and manipulate people, and the long-term effects of that are these totalitarian fascist regimes that we've seen that has come into power. And one of the main weapons that they use is this cultural Marxism, political correctness type of mindset. So this has been Pastor Joe Green, and as usual, I'm going to play a couple of clips to show what I'm talking about. Please hit subscribe on my YouTube channel. If you will, go to my Patreon and pledge. You can pledge $1 per video if you like. This is all done just to continue to promote what we're doing with the 2019 movement and the other things that I believe we're doing, because we're trying to bring an awareness to the people so that we don't get taken advantage of by the devices of the enemy who looks to kill, steal, and destroy. I love you. Be blessed of the Lord. Shalom to you.
Process.
Yeah.
Identity politics is the opposite. What the left seeks, we are in a civil war situation now. And the reason it's so irreconcilable is that the left is racist. It believes in a racial hierarchy. So if you're the right skin color, which is dark, you go to the head of the line for admissions to college, you go to the head of the line for a job, you go to the head of the line for a promotion, you go to the head of the line for almost anything. Everything's not diverse enough, so we'll take anybody.
So what would you say to the people that would say, well, white people had it good for a long time, and
yeah, and white people did a lot of, they did bad things and they did good things. And one of the good things that white America did was to liberate the slaves. People forget that we inherited slavery. This is how I made myself notorious in the left, by coming out against reparations for slavery 137 years after the fact. America inherited a system of slavery. Slavery existed. I learned this from Orlando Patterson, who is a black, left-of-center sociologist at Harvard, who's written prize-winning books on slavery and freedom. Slavery existed for 3,000 years. Nobody ever said it was immoral. Not Jesus, not Moses, not Aristotle. Until a white Christian males in England, led by Wilberforce, said it's immoral. And an American slave owner, Thomas Jefferson, wrote it into the birth certificate of this country, that all men are created equal and are given right to liberty by their creator. Within 20 years, the slave trade was ended. The reason that America didn't initiate a civil war in 1776 to free the slaves, one of the biggest reasons was that England would have come and just retaken the colonies and reinstituted slavery. Anyway, and within a generation or a little more, given in those days people lived shorter lives, at the cost of 350,000 Union soldiers, we liberated the slaves and liberated them throughout the hemisphere. So black people, Americans can be very proud of their heritage. You know, it's a human heritage, so it's got a lot of bad spots, but you look at any other country in the world, and forgive me, leftists, for saying this, this one is the best. What other country do Haitians get in boats and risk their lives to get into? You think they're coming here to be oppressed?
Right. I mean, everybody wants to
be here.
And then the funny thing is, this at the same time, you go to watch some of these protests, and the people that are screaming about how racist and evil and patriarchy and all this stuff, they're also the ones calling for open borders. They want everyone to share in the horror that is the United
Well, it would just
States.
Destroy the country, as anybody with any sense knows.
So how do
it's all, but let me just say,
yeah,
the left owes whatever ideas it has to Marx. It's the Marxist paradigm of the oppressors and the oppressed. And it's an economic, it begins as an economic, and they've layered on race and gender. But the fact is, what determines a country's prosperity is culture, not classes. It's culture. America has a great culture. We take in, I mean, one of the things we do is we take in brilliant people from all over the world and give them freedom to innovate. Other countries copy our innovations. Israel is the same way. It's why they hate it.
Because they're bringing in people from all over the world, giving them opportunity.
But also it's the freedom.
Yeah.
People do not appreciate freedom in this country. Obviously, since our universities are now totalitarian institutions, I can't go to a university without bodyguards.
Yeah.
And that's been true for the last 15 years. I've been physically attacked. If I didn't have bodyguards and if the university didn't put in place security, I could never get through a speech.
Yeah.
And I'm not alone. It's any conservative.
No, it's virtually any conservative,
Yes.
and now it's moderates and
this is fascism, and it's totally embedded in our university system.
Yeah. Do you make a distinction between sort of the leaders who really understand the stuff that you're talking about? So the people who are the leaders of this leftist movement versus the bulk of the people who I think are following along without bad intentions. Like when I see all these kids who I mock them on Twitter.
Yeah, of course, people go to demonstrations to get laid.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and people are gullible and they don't think and they can't put two and two together. The phrase, which I didn't want to skip this, people of color, is a racist phrase. It's not English. Do we say, here's a box of crayons of color? Mm-hmm. It's French. That's the way French people speak. Peuple de couleur, or whatever they say.
Yeah.
So it's a completely ideological construct.
So
what is its function? Well, let's look at Mexico. Two main ethnic groups. The descendants of the Spanish conquistadors who slaughtered the indigenous Indians and the descendants of the indigenous Indians. When they cross the border, they're both people of color. Therefore, they're oppressed, both of them, the conquistadors and the indigenous people. Yeah. They're oppressed. They deserve special sensitivities and special privileges. Maharajas in India are people of color. Beheaders in Raqqa are people of color. Who aren't people of color? White people.
Yeah.
White people are evil, bad. This is the racist ideology of our time.
How indignant can progressives make themselves? There's a real competition going on, and it's sweeping the nation. Progressive versus progressive, competing to see who can most flamboyantly claim to be offended, to proclaim that their feelings have been hurt, or that their sensitivities have been rubbed raw, or their serenity disturbed, or their composure discombobulated by something that someone has said, or by something they have seen, such as a Confederate flag, or a building named after Woodrow Wilson. But, actually, I think progressives are not sufficiently imaginative. There are many more things they could be indignant about, starting with where I live, Washington, D.C. The Washington Post newspaper is, if it will pardon the expression, on the warpath against the name of the Washington Redskins football team. The paper says the name is racist, insulting, demeaning, insensitive, and so on. But the Washington Post takes its name from its city, which is named for George Washington, who was not only a slave owner, he was a tobacco farmer, which some progressives probably think is almost as awful. No way! Surely the Post should change its name and should demand that the nation's capital be renamed, perhaps as Eleanor Roosevelt City. Obviously, it cannot be named for her husband, he who ordered the internment of 117,000 persons of Japanese descent, 2/3 of whom were native-born American citizens. And there are hundreds of other towns, counties, parks, and schools named for Washington, such as Washington and Lee University. Good grief, the name is double hate speech. Robert E. Lee actually commanded the Confederate Army. Washington is not the only name progressives should scrutinize. The word Oklahoma is a compound of two words from the Choctaw language, words meaning red and people. If it is intolerable to have a football team named Redskins, it must be worse to have a state named Red People. But let's get back to cleansing America of all mentions of historic figures who were less than perfect progressives. On the tidal basin in Washington, there's a memorial to the slave-owning Thomas Jefferson. This memorial should have a trigger warning carved into its marble. Jacksonville, Florida, and Jackson, Mississippi, and many other places and things are named for Andrew Jackson, the tormentor of Native Americans. All must be renamed for someone who was saintly as progressives understand saintliness, And speaking of saints, surely good progressives are traumatized by the names of St. Louis, St. Petersburg, San Diego, San Antonio, not to mention Corpus Christi. Progressives like it when courts rule that non-denominational prayers at high school graduations violate the separation of church and state. Why then don't they consider it a constitutional outrage that there are cities named for religious figures, including Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco? That city is, if progressives will pardon the expression, the Vatican of American progressivism. Progressives should demand that all such cities be renamed for progressive saints. Tony Bennett could sing, "I left my heart in Nancy Pelosi City." Or we could give these places names that give no offense because they have no meaning. Joseph Nippenberg is an American rarity, a sensible professor. His droll suggestion is that we spare progressives from discomfort by giving cities and buildings the kind of meaningless names that are given to car models, names such as Acura and Elantra and Sentra. And what about the state flag of hyper-progressive Massachusetts? Its flag depicts a Native American holding, brace yourself, a bow and arrow, a weapon. Surely progressivism's sensitivity police cannot permit this depiction. It reinforces the hurtful stereotype of Native Americans as less than perfectly peaceful people. Minnesota, too, should hang its head in shame. Its state seal depicts a pioneer tilling a field and a Native American riding away and carrying a spear. Any progressive can see that this seal conveys multiple racial slurs. The spear, another weapon, another stereotype of Native Americans as violent. The Native American riding away is stigmatized as nomadic, hence unproductive, whereas the farmer who is white is industrious. So, the seal communicates subliminal slander, the coded message of white superiority. Who knew that Minnesotans who have voted Democratic in 10 consecutive elections since 1972 embrace white supremacy? I could go on, but you get the picture. Still, you should feel sorry for the progressive sensitivity enforcers. Those who constantly find reason to take offense are rarely happy people. The problem, however, is that such people make almost everyone else miserable too. I'm George Will for Prager University.
To subscribe to our YouTube channel, click here. To help keep our videos free, donate here.